Today on the program, Ukraine Today. The assault in Donbas. Pokrovsk has become the second Bakhmut. The Russian army is destroying eastern Ukraine. Military factories are burning in Russia. Ukraine does not leave Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure unanswered, without a response. Apparently, the head of the White House is seriously angry at the Kremlin dictator Putin. He keeps deceiving him, and Trump really doesn't like that. The US has imposed sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil. Ukrainian forces are preparing Crimea for deoccupation. I've gathered for you the most important and significant news about Russia's war against Ukraine from the past week. My name is Yulia Kort. Good evening. The city of Pokrovsk is currently the hottest spot on the front line in Ukraine. The assault on Pokrovsk has been ongoing for over a year and has become one of the bloodiest battles since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. The last time Russian forces captured a city of comparable size was in May 2023. That city was Bakhmut. At the moment, the fighting has moved into the center of Pokrovsk. Ukrainian military bloggers are talking about how difficult the situation is. Meanwhile, Russian Z military correspondents are calling the area around this key city a cauldron for the Ukrainian armed forces. Currently, most of the city is in the zone of active combat, and a significant deterioration in the positions of Ukrainian troops has occurred literally in the last 7 days. Russian public channels are reporting fierce fighting in the southeast of the city near the railway. The head of the Ukrainian Armed Forces assault units called this direction one of the most difficult, but noted that Ukrainian assault units are actively operating in the city and conducting counter-sabotage operations. The fields near Pokrovsk are littered with the bodies of Russian assault troops. Russia is intensifying its shelling. Since the beginning of October, 860 guided bombs have been dropped on Pokrovsk and its surroundings, 156 of which were dropped on October 22nd alone. Most of the strikes targeted the northern part of the city. According to the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, about 1,000 civilians remain in the city, which is engulfed in fighting and constant shelling. And before 2022, the population was over 60,000 people. In the past week, only one family has managed to be evacuated because most routes are under the fire control of Russian troops and drones. People are hiding in basements and only come out to get water. Almost 90% of the buildings in Pokrovsk have been destroyed. The enemy is wiping the city off the face of the earth. Kucherev Yar, north of Pokrovsk, was recently liberated from Russian troops. More than 50 Russian prisoners were captured there. The Ukrainian armed forces used drones to liberate the village of Torsky, which is in Donbas in the Lyman direction. Up to 100 Russian soldiers who were hiding in basements were killed there. If Ukraine loses control of the city of Pokrovsk, it will also pose a threat to the neighboring city of Mirnohrad. Together with the surrounding settlements, they form a large fortified agglomeration. At the same time, the Russian command is focusing on storming the city of Rodinske, which has a population of about 10,000 people. It is located just 3 kilometers north of Mirnohrad. The capture of Rodinsky would allow Russian forces to virtually cut off the retreat routes of the Ukrainian armed forces from Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, leaving Ukrainian units with only a narrow corridor about 5 kilometers wide along a single country road for withdrawal. Ukraine, for its part, does not leave Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure unanswered. They do not go unanswered. Footage from the site of the explosion at the Plastmass plant in the Chelyabinsk region of the Russian Federation has appeared in the public domain. This is a major enterprise in Russia that produces ammunition and explosives, which makes it a legitimate target. More on these and other hot events in Russia in our report. Very friendly and welcoming Ukrainian
drones visited a military plastics factory near Chelyabinsk, causing a powerful explosion there. Magnetic equipment manufactures and equips pistols. An encounter with UAVs in Ryazan and Skopin, gunfire was heard. An encounter with UAVs in Ryazan and Skopin. An encounter with UAVs in Ryazan and Skopin. An encounter with UAVs in Ryazan and Skopin. The return to Diaghilevo was intended for equipping with oil and lubricants. The equipment operators also feel the heat on the front line. Paratroopers liberated Kucherev Yar in the direction of Dobropilya and captured more than 50 Russians. The liberation
of this village is a continuation of the successful actions of Ukrainian servicemen toward Dobropilya as they eliminate the consequences of Russian destruction in Ukraine's deep positions.
the situation in the city of Pokrovsk, which is under attack by the Russian army. According to the servicemen, evacuation from the city is almost impossible, and civilians can only leave the area on foot.
At this point, the fighting is already taking place almost in the center of Pokrovsk. This is the area where Ukrainian soldiers are destroying small groups of assorted Russian occupiers. The occupiers are trying to break through the defenses of the Ukrainian forces in order to create so-called local cauldrons, operational encirclements of our units.
Ukraine is not the only one involved in this. The British Army intercepted a Russian warship, the Admiral Kulakov, in its territorial waters, according to Sky News.
The Russian Federation is trying to show that it is fully prepared to achieve its objectives in this confrontation, together with NATO member countries and the United States.
Let me remind you that the United States has redeployed its nuclear arsenal to the territory of Great Britain for the first time since 2008.
The head of the police ministry warned that Ukrainian forces are destroying another target that is important to the Russian military machine, namely blowing up the Druzhba oil pipeline.
The police website is well aware that the Druzhba oil pipeline operation means, first and foremost, financing the active phase of hostilities on the territory of our country.
The Donald Trump administration lifted a key restriction on the use of long-range munitions provided by Western partners. This effectively allows Kyiv to strike targets on Russian territory and increases military pressure on the Kremlin, according to the Wall Street Journal. Commenting on the information published by journalists, Trump noted that Ukraine is using European munitions and that he cannot control this. The American president also described the goals of the Russian dictator.
I've always felt that he wants all of Ukraine, not just a part of it. I think he wants to make a deal. I think he'll agree. We'll see. In the morning,
on October 23rd, the European Union announced the adoption of the 19th package of sanctions against Russia. Its goal is to restrict the export of liquefied gas and to monitor the activities of the shadow fleet used for transporting oil. Forces.
Of unmanned systems reported shooting down their first 1,000 Shahed drones. The total value of these drones is about $70 million. The lives saved are priceless. More about Ukrainian interceptor drones.
Sting is a product of the Ukrainian military industry. Its price is about $2,500, which is several times cheaper than the Ukrainian Shaheds. This is what makes this interceptor drone essential for Ukraine's military defense. Just a week ago, this method of shooting down Shaheds seemed impossible. Now everything has changed dramatically.
What once seemed laughable has turned into an inexpensive and important element of Ukraine's defense. Instead of Russia bombarding its cities with increasingly powerful waves of explosive drones, Ukraine most often uses inefficient interceptors to stop them. This weapon took down 150 attacking drones during the last bombardment. Now Ukraine is trying to produce 1,000 interceptors a day.
One of the world's leading news outlets, Business Insider, says that interceptor drones like the Sting, which Ukraine is now actively producing, could become a game changer in the war because they cost much less than the Shaheds.
It has always been this way and always will be. There are always those seeking cheap ways to destroy their enemies, in the form of drones and missions. And these interceptors, which basically cost 10 times less than the strike drones used to attack civilians or military targets, have led to an increase in such solutions. Since the beginning of 2024,
Ukrainian engineers and drone developers have been actively and diligently converting standard quadcopters into drones, capable of destroying Shaheds.
The design of interceptors is involved in this development. For example, the Sting is used with military levers that can reach speeds of up to 340 kilometers per hour, using 4 rotary levers. This sensor-verified interceptor, produced by the Ukrainian drone workshop Wild Hornets, looks like a missile and is small enough to fit in a bag. Other interceptors look like small gliders. The operators who deploy them must react to threats in time. Sting, the pilot, said that his team heads out at night based on tips from the reconnaissance group, who have only 10 minutes for the interceptors to catch the Russian drones before they leave the area.
Of the raid, the improvement of drone interceptors will never stop, not even for a minute. There is a 30% success rate. For some interceptors, it's 80% or even 90%. Success depends on a large number of factors: the type of target, timing of the interception, and many others. The issue and need for interceptors has increased not only in Ukraine, but also in NATO after the first Russian drones crossed into Poland, especially as the Kremlin continues to invest huge sums in the development and production of Shahed drones. Ukraine and NATO want to have effective and, most importantly, cost-effective capabilities for
their control. We filmed an agreement with some fairly major leaders in certain sectors. Some technologies, for example, we took from employees we had worked with, and they were integrated into our solutions.
And according to statistical projections, the Kremlin may soon launch up to 2,000 Shahed modifications. In addition, Russia is upgrading the Shaheds, and in the future they may reach speeds of up to 300 kilometers per hour. So the emergence of Ukrainian interceptor drones should improve and enhance the effectiveness of operations in the field. Especially so since, from a financial standpoint, Ukrainian interceptors are expensive, and victory in war always depends on economically viable solutions.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Europe has managed to create a new generation of interceptor drones. In France, another stage of testing for a new system to intercept those very guided aerial bombs, or simply KABIs, was held at a test range. The project has progressed from concept to several prototypes and is being carried out with the participation of 2 French companies and 1 German company. Radar software using artificial intelligence and the interceptor drone. Imagine a simulated target was identified, tracked, and locked on by a radar equipped with an advanced sensor system. After that, thanks to AI-based software, the interceptor drone, following a pre-calculated trajectory, engages the designated targets. Aerial bombs pose a serious problem for Ukrainian air defense and frontline settlements, which is why the development of effective means to neutralize them is of great interest. The technology has already proven effective against Shahed attack drones, but working with aerial bombs required further refinement of the algorithms and combat platforms. We hope that Ukraine will be able to use them against Russia on the battlefield in the near future. Apparently, the head of the White House is seriously angry with the Kremlin dictator Putin. He is deceiving him again.
As soon as
The green light came from the Oval Office, the Senate committee sprang into action. There, they supported 3 legislative initiatives aimed against Russia, which started the war in Ukraine. Among other things, this includes recognizing the Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism and the use of destructive substances. However, the Senate itself suggests that it is not possible to vote on these bills due to the government shutdown. Nevertheless, in just one day, it seems that at sea, they managed to shut Putin up. There you have it. But, as analysts remind us, it's too soon to call Trump a hero. Donald, as before, does not want Ukraine to win. He just wants everything to end as quickly as possible. Along the current lines, he wants to wear the badge of the great peacemaker and shift all subsequent problems into the hands of the Europeans.
Trump acts according to his own logic. That is, Ukraine wants peace. That's right. We'll stop at the line of demarcation. So that's all there is to it. Ukraine is ready to take the shortest and simplest path. Russia doesn't want that. So according to Trump's logic, the pressure needs to be put on Russia, which is what happened in the form of these sanctions. At the same time, according to Trump's logic, if tomorrow the Russians say they're ready to ease sanctions, they will go along with these sanctions and will be ready to ease sanctions and make some other concessions. He hopes that with the help of sanctions, he will be able to reach Putin's reasoning. He'll say, we're losing and you're losing. Let's talk about how to get out of this situation.
Trump, who thinks he's a businessman, analysts say, failed to take into account the most important thing, the logic of Putin. A dictator doesn't care about the well-being of millions of Russians or about economic stagnation. He has his own priorities, and he won't change them. Not under any pressure, not under any circumstances. He
lives in war, you understand? There will be money for the front, there will be money for the army, there will be money to transport soldiers. Those resources they've been finding for 3 or 4 years already, they'll find even more. That's all he thinks about, and he probably believes that everything will be fine. And the fact that at some point something will collapse, people will live badly, there will be no gas or something else, they'll find gas for the tanks and everyone else will just walk. That's basically his entire logic. He doesn't feel sorry for anyone. Not just Ukrainians, he doesn't feel sorry for Russians either. So really, what's there to be surprised about? Until
Now, the only one who has reacted to the demonstrative round across the ocean has been the unpredictable one. Dmitry Medvedev, whom analysts say isn't even worth responding to. On the contrary, not a single word from any official representatives. And most likely in Moscow, they will claim that everything is going according to plan.
I'm explaining that they have no response at all. Medvedev is playing the role of the bad cop and is offended by Trump. But, as we've already seen this year, Putin and Trump don't deceive each other. They're smart, they just deceive each other a little bit. That's why I don't think Putin will make any radical statements or start deceiving Trump and say that they're now enemies. He'll probably just say something like, oh, he was a bit mistaken, we'll talk, we'll sort things out. I don't think we're to blame for him coming out shouting and saying, well, that's it for me. I've lost power, I've lost the war, new sanctions, I've been destroyed.
Will Vladimir Putin be able to get everything back? And will Trump stand up for empty matters and such tactics? It's obvious to analysts that, unlike the meeting in Anchorage, the US president realized much faster that the desired outcome was not going to happen. But it seems he got a kick in the pants. India and China, according to the media, will be forced to cancel.
The Russian black gold famine, which describes the crisis caused by a significant reduction in Russia's oil and gas exports, continues to affect the region. Ukrainian defenders, who remain vigilant and determined, are now making preparations to reclaim Crimea, working to ensure the peninsula is ready for deoccupation. Next.
About how this is happening and what awaits the occupiers there.
Crimea is fighting back against the Russian Federation and the destruction of the Crimean coastline. It's just a matter of time, as Eastern publications write. We already have a crisis on the peninsula. Some areas have been left without electricity. There isn't enough even for the most essential places, and those who remain in chaos are now shooting at their own plans. We know that as a military base, Crimea is becoming more and more inconvenient for Russia because it has no water. So the last few days have become a new reality of life on the peninsula. The key event was a series of strikes in the Kvardisk area, where after precise hits there was a major DND, the largest depot in this region. According to locals, the depot in Kvardisk could be seen from the suburbs of Simferopol, with smoke visible for many kilometers. In Kvardisk, there were strikes not only on the depot, but also on the naval base, as well as on the Russian military garrison that is stationed there. According to information that is currently being shared and discussed online by various sources, the garrison area was also reportedly hit. Additionally, the Feodosia depot has also partially ceased operations due to several attacks. This month, a total of 11 fleet tanks were completely destroyed, as clearly evidenced by recent high-resolution satellite images. Why is the story about the Feodosia depot so important? Because it didn't just burn down in place. In this case, if you don't understand what this phrase means, you can share it with us. Guard tanks. The base must be closed. This is a recommendation for the occupying criminal authorities, who have also confirmed that there is none gasoline, no diesel, say the local authorities. Since the beginning of the week, diesel fuel has also been disappearing in Crimea, says a local activist. In these situations, the suggestion by the head of the occupying criminal administration, Sergei Aksionov, to stabilize the fuel supply situation is simply impossible. This was added by Z propagandist Alexander Sergeyev. At the same time, the authorities are trying to avoid giving a real picture of what is happening in Crimea. Thus, only this past weekend, police initiated at least 4 administrative cases against residents of the peninsula for social media posts. People in particular were complaining about the fuel shortage. Interestingly, Russians themselves are helping the Ukrainian armed forces identify targets in Crimea. Experts have analyzed that now these targets can be found simply by opening maps on the internet. Explosions at military sites on Yandex.Maps. This is definitely one of them. Another factor that contributes to the regular strikes in Crimea is the work of the defense forces targeting Russian air defense sites on the peninsula. Just recently, the GUR managed to strike the occupiers' newest radar system. We're talking about the Valde complex, which was developed to detect small drones. The SBU continues to systematically reduce the enemy's military, logistical, and economic capabilities to do anything. In Crimea, in other occupied territories, and even on Russian territory. But Crimea suffers more because its military defense systems were thoroughly destroyed there. They had no way to protect themselves, and now we are working as if inside the body. By the way, so that the occupiers in Crimea don't get the impression that everything will return to normal, along with stocks of oil and military equipment, Ukrainian forces have not forgotten about those who supply electricity. Russian bases. In several regions of the peninsula, Ukrainian defenders organized strikes. At night in Crimea, several electrical substations were hit, and in particular the main substation in Jankoy, or Jankong as we used to call it in Crimea. So now strikes are appearing in Penza as well. And here, Putin doesn't have many options. And again, if he continues to attack Ukraine's infrastructure, the occupiers in Crimea will be left without electricity and fuel. And the cherry on top. In one of the recent attacks, Russian artillery crews got so nervous that they started firing at everything in sight. As a result, a Russian military aircraft worth about $50 million was lost. During a nighttime attack by Ukrainian drones, Russian forces shot down their own Su-30SM. This happened right in the area of the Gvardeyskoye airfield. At the same time, there is no good news for the occupiers when it comes to air defense. Analysts have noted that recently there have been more strikes on Russian territory, which led to the decision to partially redeploy air defense systems from Crimea to Russia for protection.
And finally, the Russian Propaganda Digest. Here's a selection of fakes that Kremlin propagandists are using for disinformation purposes.
There was a deep and intense hatred towards Ukraine. One of the pastor's visitors who had been present at the gathering made the shocking and sudden decision to shoot at the speaker. In the chaos that followed, he exploded, causing panic and fear among everyone who was there. The man was blown up. The pastor's visitor gives him first aid, and then the bus arrives. There are 2 victims. Instead of just the man losing his leg, the woman was also injured. She is in medical care in the hospital, and the man is in critical condition and in a subjective
condition. This is yet another fake from Russian propaganda, since the city was under Russian occupation several years ago. What kind of music would there be? Okin Elzy, in reality? Perhaps some former special military operation hero detonated a grenade in the city center, injuring 2 people. At the same time, Russian television was blaming Europe for destroying Putin's agreements with Trump. For example, on the TV channel Russia 1, they did not mention the Eastern media, which explained the cancellation of the meeting as being due to Putin's unrealistic demands. At the same time, the Eastern
media report that Brussels and Kiev are ready to present their own meeting, mainly not to discuss the main reasons, but to ease the conflict. Everyone
except Russia is trying to destroy the agreements, as was said on NTV.
The issue that Trump said he didn't want to hold a meeting just for the sake of having a meeting, of course, was also mentioned on NTV. In
response to statements from Eastern media that the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump was cancelled, Russia stated that preparations on this issue are not yet complete. In Moscow, it was explained that international media are deliberately distorting information in order to undermine the agreements. According to the Wall Street Journal, citing sources, Defense Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio continue to communicate. Instead,
of the fact that every day Russian occupiers send hundreds of drones and continue relentless attacks on Ukrainian cities, the Kremlin is reportedly eager to resume agreements as soon as possible. Z propaganda is also spreading a fake story about a Latvian Gennady, mass deportations, and deaths in lines for the Russian language exam. Duma Chairman Volodin even accused Latvia of exterminating Russians because permanent residents had to prove their knowledge of the Latvian language.
79 years later, Latvia is following the path of Nazi Germany, persecuting people for dissent, abandoning the elderly. This is exactly what Hitler did. But Europe remained silent, and now it remains silent. For far too long. Then fascism came knocking on the door of every
one of these countries. But the main requirement is to know the language at an elementary level, to be able to ask for directions, understand, and talk about yourself. In reality, Russian propaganda is pouring in. Latvia is not deporting anyone en masse. Out of approximately 30,000 Russians living in the country, the majority have passed. Language test 2,600 remained as volunteers, and 841 people were required to leave the country because they failed to meet the requirements in time. Even these cases are now being handled individually. The number of deportations can be counted in a single way. During wartime, it's not only the propagandists who benefit from propaganda, but also their children. For example, we can point out that Vladimir Solovyov's child began working for his father at the start of 2022 and increased her benefits more than tenfold. Since then, the romantic relationship between basketball player Svetlana Abrosimova and the chief Russian propagandist led her to a new job.
Among those not engaged in business, Abrosimova works at M Production, a company that produces Evening with Solovyov as well as programs for Solovyov TV. According to federal records, Abrosimova earns between 50,000 and 100,000 rubles. Svetlana is not mentioned on the company's own website. According to the records, Abrosimova is not employed anywhere. At the same time, over the past 3 years, she managed to increase the amount in her bank account tenfold. If in 2021 there were only 8 million rubles in Sberbank, by 2024 this had grown to 86 million, which exceeds $1 million.
Solovyov has not communicated with or lived with his official wife Elga Sepi for a very long time. And at the same time, they want to dedicate the Order of Courage to Ivan Zuev, journalist Maria Narko. Let us remember that the so-called war correspondent died in Zaporizhia while filming yet another video about how the Russian army is occupying the territory of another country.
the Russian propagandist remains encased in fiberglass, completely surrounded by this strong and rigid material. The fiberglass forms a protective shell around the individual, ensuring that they are fully isolated and unable to move or interact with their environment. Leave a like and see you next time.